What is happening, friends and family? Welcome back to episode 9 of Manny's food channel. And today I'm going to make a dish for the very first time actually. It's a dish that's been on my mind for quite a while. It's going to be a fusion of Italian and Persian as well. So today I'm going to be making pan-seared scallop with saffron and Barberries risotto. Now there's this preconceived idea that risotto is a difficult dish to make. It's quite the opposite actually. It's extremely easy to make, very simple, very minimal prep and ingredients that you need to make a simple risotto dish. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. So for this recipe, I have some saffron. You only need very little for your dish. Some barberries. If you can't buy that from the grocery store, you can definitely omit this step. We have some shallots, some grated Parmesan we're going to add in at the end, some butter, some green peas, a little bit of olive oil. If you don't have time to make chicken stock, you can definitely buy chicken stock from the grocery store. I'm using just Campbell's chicken stock. Arborio rice for the main component of the risotto dish. And finally, scallops. Now these I bought from the grocery store. They were frozen, but you can buy them fresh. The fresher the better, and they also taste better as well. Anyhow, let's get to the dish. Now before we get into it, I'm just going to quickly explain how I'm going to make this dish. First we're going to saute a little bit of the shallots, and then we're going to add the arborio rice to it. Do not ever wash the risotto rice because you want that starchiness to go into the dish. That ultimately adds to the creaminess of the dish as well. And right after that, it's going to call for a little bit of white wine. Now my family doesn't drink and I don't drink either, so we don't have any white wine to deglaze the pan at that stage, which I'll show you in a little bit when we get started. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of chicken stock to deglaze the pan, and then I'll show you step by step from there how we're going to make this dish. This will be the only prep that you really have to do for the risotto. And what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to put the stock on the stove and start heating it up. You only want to bring the stock up to a very, very light simmer, just enough so it keeps warm as we're adding little at a time of stock to the risotto. Okay, so to start off the dish, I am simply going to put a little bit of olive oil and just sweat off the shallots for about 4 or 5 minutes. Don't add any color into it because it's going to change the flavor of the dish. So we just want to sweat it off until it turns translucent. Okay, so now that the shallots are turning translucent, I'm going to make a little space in the middle and I'm going to pour in the arborio rice. And I'm going to saute this for about a minute or two until some of the starch comes off the arborio rice. And that's part of how it's going to combine and incorporate together. So the great thing about making risotto is the foundation is always the same, but you can incorporate whatever kind of flavor profile you like into the dish. So the steps from start to finish are always usually going to be the same, and then any kind of flavor you can add into it. So now that everything's been sauteed and starts to incorporate and some of the starch is releasing from the risotto, now what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 ladle of stock at a time to make sure that the risotto absorbs it before we add in stock. But before I do that, this will be the step where you can add in the white wine to deglaze the pan. But instead of white wine, I'm just going to add a little bit of chicken stock, just so we can scrape off any flavors that's at the bottom of the dish and start to incorporate some of that flavor. So now what I'm going to do is I have about a 6-ounce ladle here, but just put enough stock to cover the risotto and make sure that the risotto absorbs the stock before you add the next ladle. Don't add all the ladle one at a time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to constantly mix this, and I left it on medium heat, and when all of the stock is absorbed, then I'm going to add another ladle of stock. And what I'm also going to do now, as the stock is being absorbed, I'm also going to toss in the saffron that I have, so that way we can incorporate the flavor of the saffron at the very beginning rather than the very end. So as we continuously to add stock, the flavor will be released from the saffron, and it will change the color into a very light yellowish color. So as we're adding in the stock, making sure that it's absorbed before we add in the next ladle of stock. One way of knowing whether or not your risotto is cooked or not is cooking it to al dente. And what al dente literally means is to the bite. Now what that means is you should see just slightly in the middle of the grain that it's slightly whiter than the outside, but the outside of the grain is cooked. Similar kind of to when you're cooking spaghetti, you don't want to overcook it, you have a little bit of a bite when you're biting into it. Same concept with risotto, so we cook it to al dente. And this process of cooking risotto usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes, doesn't take that long, and you have one simple, amazingly delicious dish. So now that the stock is almost absorbed, I'm going to add in another ladle of stock. And the stock that I have in the back it was lightly simmering and I just turned it down, so now I'm just keeping it warm. And with this risotto here, I'm just going to continuously mix it before I add in the next ladle of stock. So as you can see, it's been around 5 minutes or so, and I've added about 2 to 3 ladles of stock. The saffron has started to change the color of the risotto and also start to perfume and add some of the flavor in there as well. So now all we have to do is continuously add the stock until the risotto is ready. Okay, so the risotto is almost ready. I cooked it to al dente, which has a bit of a bite in the dish. So now I'm just going to add in the barberries, finish it off. Now barberries are a little bit sour, a little bit tart as well, so it cuts down some of the richness of the dish. And I'm going to throw in a knob of butter to also give a little bit of extra richness and milkiness in there as well. And finally, I'm going to add some grated Parmesan. So I'm just going to grate some Parm here. And I'm also going to garnish it with a little bit of Parm as well. Now, not to overcook it, I just turned off the stove, just to make sure that it stays creamy and not overcooked. So now I'm going to mix this all together, and I'm going to set it aside, and we're going to quickly do the scallop, which should take about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll start plating. Now, in order to have a good sear on the scallop, the first thing we have to do is make sure that the scallops are very dry. We don't want to have any excess water or liquid that might ruin the possibility of boiling the scallop instead of searing it. So what we're trying to do is we want it to be glistening on the inside, but also nicely golden brown on the outside. So first, we're just going to quickly dry it all up. And next up, what we're going to do is season it from afar. Don't be too close to it. So we're going to season it with just a touch of salt and a little bit of crushed pepper on both sides. We're going to flip it over, and we're going to do the same thing. Touch of salt and a touch of pepper. And I'm just going to roll it around in the seasoning as well, so the sides of it also get some of that seasoning. So a couple things are extremely important when you're searing off a scallop. One is making sure that your pan is extremely hot, and don't add any oil until the pan is very hot. And also season the scallop just before you are about to cook them. And we're going to cook them on each side for about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, depending on how thick they are. So my pan is pretty much close to scorching hot. So now I'm going to add a touch of olive oil. Twist it around. Start at 12 o'clock and move it to 3 and then 6. And when you add your scallop, you should hear a sizzling. And don't move it until it's been at least 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. So it's been about 1.5 minutes. I'm going to flip them over. Got that nice golden char at the top. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some butter and I'm going to baste the scallops. Just a touch of butter. Doesn't have to be too much. And then basting just means grabbing some of the butter and thoroughly putting it on top of the scallops until the scallops are cooked. At this point, you can turn your heat down a little bit so you don't burn your scallops. And make sure do not overcook them so that they turn rubbery. You want it to still be glistening right in the middle. And then once you're done, just put it on a plate with some paper towel to remove any of that excess fat. So now all three of my scallops are cooked. I don't want to overcook them, so I'm just going to put them on a plate with paper towel. And in the same pan, with all that flavor, I'm just going to quickly saute the green peas. Very quickly, about 30 seconds to a minute. And I'm going to season it just a touch with a little bit of salt. And a touch of black pepper as well. Roll it around, incorporate some of that flavor. And now I'm going to remove it off heat and we can start plating.
And there we have it, friends. Pan-seared scallop with saffron and Barberries risotto, garnish with Parmesan and sauteed green peas. Now the best part's coming up, the taste test.
You know, if I had one wish, it would be to eat whatever I want and never get fat. But unfortunately, I am not gifted with those genetics. But I'm gonna eat and get fat anyways, and I'm doing it for you. So, time for the taste test. Let's see. First, we're gonna cut into the scallop. Nice and glistening, moist. We're gonna mix it in with a little bit of the risotto. Cheers. It's freaking delicious. It's been on my mind actually, this recipe, for a couple years now, and I'm so glad that I finally get to execute on it. So have a try, let me know how it is, and thank you for watching. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to this video. If you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel, and let me know what kind of recipes you'd like to see, and I'll try and make them happen. Till next time.